My success, I think, stems from a lot of my demons. I always tell people that most of my greatest assets are also my biggest weaknesses. For example, I am extremely obsessive. If I get locked on to something, I get locked on with absolute laser focus, and nothing else matters to me. It's absolute tunnel vision.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Keep the Change. This one's very special. For one thing, the gentleman I'm hanging out with today is an absolute stud in the independent used car business. Anthony Birdsong is from Hampstead, Maryland, and he's got a dealership called Hampstead Pre-Owned, which is the number one independent used car dealership in Maryland. And he and I are going to talk leadership. He's got a story I think you're going to want to hear about overcoming. Anthony, thanks for joining me, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Bart. I appreciate being here.
And you know what? Anthony is a budding speaker. He's a motivational guy. He knows how to motivate people. And you're going to see Anthony on some stages here pretty quick too, but he can tell you about that a little bit later. But for now, let's talk about how you got where you are. You have overcome, my friend. So give some folks an idea of who you were, who you are, and how you got so successful in your business.
Oh, that's a really long-winded answer, but I'll try to do my best. My success, I think, stems from a lot of my demons. I always tell people that most of my greatest assets are also my biggest weaknesses. For example, I am extremely obsessive. If I get locked on to something, I get locked on with absolute laser focus, and nothing else matters to me. It's absolute tunnel vision. And I think this stems a lot from my childhood and the different things that, like you said, I had to overcome. I was born to a father who was addicted to crack cocaine and a mother who was a teenage mom. She was 17 years old and she left. My paternal grandmother ended up raising me. And when I was about 11 years old, she got really sick. And so I ended up having to move with my uncle, who was in the military, to Moscow. He was deployed there at the time. And while we were there, her sickness progressed very quickly, much quicker than they thought it was going to. And we ended up in December, on December 10th, catching an emergency flight out of Moscow. And we got back just in time to see her pass away, which was December 13th, 1996. It was a Friday. She died at about 2 o'clock in the morning. And that was a life-changing event for me. And at the time, I thought it was one of the worst things that could possibly happen to me. But looking back, had that not happened, I wouldn't be the man I am today. And so in a lot of ways, my grandmother sacrificed herself so I could become the person that I am, because I could do no wrong in her eyes. You know, my father could do no wrong in her eyes, and that was how he ended up the way that he did. And I could do no wrong in her eyes, and I was on a fast track to be in a very similar position as my father. So her passing away, actually, had that not happened, you know, I would have ended up in jail or dead or who knows what. But she did pass away, and we ended up coming back from Russia about 7 months later. When we came back from Russia, for anybody who's in the military, my uncle was placed on TDY duty. So he had to leave the house, and I was left in the house with my Aunt Erin, who was a wonderful lady, but I was always a bigger guy. So when I was in eighth grade, I was 5'10", 250 pounds, just to give you guys kind of a reference. And if Aaron wanted me to do something and I didn't want to do it, I just didn't do it. And without a strong male role model in the house, that didn't work. So Aaron could not keep me. And my uncle Webster, who was actually my grandmother's brother-in-law, so my grandmother's sister, Vicky, and her husband Webster, they ended up taking me, and they basically kept me until I met my wife when I was 20 years old. Now, there was some things that happened in there, like for a short period of time, because I was declared a child in need of assistance. My mother ended up taking me, and then she changed the locks on the doors, and then Webster took me back. I was in military school for a little while, which was another one of my uncle's ideas. I ended up getting kicked out of military school, and Webster took me back. And every time he told me he wouldn't take me back, he always took me back. Webster was a PhD and extremely obsessive like I am. And I think that I was very lucky to end up with him at the age that I did in those critical years between 12 and 16. Because even though at the time I didn't realize it, he was molding me into the man I am today. And I look back on a lot of the conversations that we had and a lot of the things that we discussed. And I understand them now where I didn't when he was trying to explain them to me. Like, for example, the power of reading. When I was young, he used to always tell me how powerful I could be if I would just read a book. And I hated reading, so I never read. And over the last 5 years, 4 years, I've been on a self development journey and I've read hundreds of books. And I can tell you that the man that I've become versus the man that I was 4 years ago is almost unrecognizable. And the leaps and bounds that you make when you read are almost unequivalent to anything else.
Man, there is so much there to unpack. That's phenomenal. For one thing, that Webster, right? Webster,
Yeah.
what he did for you to help grow you and to be an impact for you, dude, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So that takes us to now, but I'm not quite done with back then. When you first met your wife, now you've been with your wife how long?
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
So when you first met your wife, obviously at that time you were now on the path to adult, right?
Yes.
And how did tell me about those 20s and what you did were you in automotive back then? Or tell me a little bit about your career.
My life was a mess. I
Yeah.
mean, you have to understand growing up the way that I did, I was a scared little boy
Mm.
in a man's body. I had all kinds of emotional issues. I had all kinds of mental issues. I had all kinds of insecurities. And, at 20 years old, when I met Erica, the relationship that we have today versus the relationship that we had then, it's not even recognizable.
Mm.
It's so different. And that happened through us kind of growing up together and closer instead of apart. I think some people get together and they start to grow apart. And the longer we stayed together, the more we grew together. Erica, I always tell everybody, is a very stable person. She's a very baseline person. I'm a big wave person. And what happens when you meet somebody that's a baseline person and you're a wave person is a lot of times the wave person does enough things to push the baseline person away.
Yeah.
And so one of the greatest decisions that I ever made in my life was allowing Erica to continue to love me,
Mm.
because there were a lot of things that I did that should have pushed her away. I bankrupted her. I got up to 485 pounds. I was 195, 200 pounds when I met her. So I gained 85 pounds. I bankrupted her. I was broke. I wasn't working. I was playing video games all day. And she stuck with me through all of that. She never gave up. She saw something in me like Webster did that I didn't see in myself. And she stuck with me. And together we've built this amazing life. But the beginning of that journey was more than rocky.
Man, you know what I love about you, man? You are so transparent. It is
Yeah.
so great. You're a tough guy.
Yeah.
I've talked to you on the phone probably what 5, 6 times now,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I honor that. And that's what I love about podcasts, because it allows us to sit down together, look at each other in the eye, and really get to know each other. And this is my opportunity to really get to know you and the audience as well. But selfishly, I've had an opportunity the last 3 or 4 weeks to have these discussions with you. And I thought, dude, you are a special guy. So many
I
people.
appreciate that.
I mean, think about that, man. And you know this, you'd see people all the time that work for you that have had half the tragedy that you've had, and yet they either feel entitled or they can't get out of their own way.
Yeah.
And you, through all the adversity, found a way to make it happen. You self sabotaged so many times, but one day you decided, I'm not going to do this anymore. And I just think it's fascinating. One thing to have your past, but to live in Moscow, nobody's ever lived in Moscow. Right? Nobody I've ever met has lived in Moscow for a period of time. But everything you did from your wife putting up with you, loving you through the whole process. I'm sure there was days when one of you were going to walk out, but you guys hung in there to have 20 years. I just think it's fascinating. What I also think is fascinating is so many times I'll ask people on this podcast, tell me about your childhood or tell me about why you are where you are now. And a lot of it's adversity. Some people run from adversity, but some people take adversity and they turn everything around. And
I
you're
want
definitely an example of
I want to talk about that for a minute.
please.
One of my favorite scenes in any movie ever is in The Dark Knight Rises when Bane is fighting Batman and Batman turns off the lights and Bane starts to laugh at him. And he says, "You think the darkness is your friend? I was born in the darkness. You merely adapted to the darkness." Sorry. And I will tell you that one of the things about pain is that it's very similar to a foreign language. When you grow up in the amount of pain that I grew up in, you become accustomed to pain. And by default, and being accustomed to pain is very important in relation to success because a lot of people get stuck in comfort because they want to avoid pain. As a matter of fact, our brains are pre-wired to avoid pain, right? So when you're born in pain and you become accustomed to pain and all you know is pain, then you end up by default, if you can get through that life without ending up dead in jail or addicted to drugs, you end up by default being this person that can deal with incredible levels of stress and anxiety. And I'll tell you a story about my relationship with God. So when I was a kid, I was really religious. And at night, because of my mom and my dad, I would spend a lot of evenings crying and asking God, why did you do this to me? Why are you putting me through this? Why do I have to hurt so much? And I remember never understanding why I didn't have a mom that loved me, why I didn't have a dad that loved me, why I had to grow up in such a chaotic environment, why did my father constantly break his promises to me of getting sober, and during COVID, I remember my life flashed before my eyes because I thought I was going to lose everything. And stuff was getting really tough. I mean, you couldn't buy cars and things were getting tight and there wasn't money. And I was on the ride home one night. And, I've never been a suicidal person in my life, but I started really having some deep, dark thoughts of like, if I lose this business, I don't want to live. And this is part of that laser focus and my demons being responsible for my success. When I tell you, when I started my business, that it was life or death to me, I mean, it was life or death to me. Like either that business was going to succeed or I was going to die. So when that business started to feel like I wasn't going to be able to have control over what was going on, one night I was driving home and I remember I was having these really dark thoughts and then said to myself, "You're stronger than this." And this voice came in my head, I swear to you. And it was like God speaking to me. And it said, "Now do you understand why you had to go through so much pain when you were a child? Because this would break a normal human being.
Yeah.
And you are going to persevere."
Yeah.
And so for me, you know, I wear my life as a badge of honor. I'm proud of everything that I went through. I'm thankful that my father was a drug addict. I'm thankful that my mother didn't love me. Um, I have to be very careful how I word this with my grandmother because I love her with all my heart and my soul. But, so I can't say I'm thankful that she died because I'm not thankful that she died. But again, had she not died, I would have ended up like my father.
Yeah.
And so Steve Jobs said this one time, it's very difficult to connect the dots looking forward, but it's always easy to connect the dots looking backwards, especially when you attain some level of success. You can start to look at little areas in your life and say, That's why I had to go through that failure. That's why I had to learn that lesson. Oh, that's why I had to experience that pain.
Oh man, so good. Thank you for landing that. I'm a person of faith. I love Jesus.
Yeah.
And through as you and I have talked about, I've got 40 years of sobriety, but it took me 10 years of sobriety to understand who Jesus was.
Yeah.
And I still had other addictions. And I had to, frankly, go about 40 years, a little over 40 years with other addictions before I finally got it. I'm not a fast study, but I know that I had to go through all of that. And I know that, there's the devil's will, there's God's will, and there's free will, right? And just because we've had adversity doesn't mean it's God's will. It's like you said, for some reason, there was this dark that was happening. And there was also free will of people that didn't do what they were supposed to do. In other words, take care of their kids, love their kids, right?
Yeah.
And yet, through all of that, again, you're a perfect example of, and I love what you said, man. I had to bring this in because you said, I heard this voice.
Yeah.
And what I'm guessing is, you were in a religious household that was just a nightmare. So your relationship probably with God drifted a bit, I bet. But when you heard that voice, you knew who it was, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there was definitely a period in my life, I would say that from 18 to like 25, 26, where I was in the blame everybody else period of my life and the entitlement stage of my life and the anger stage of my life, where I drifted away from everything. And, I can remember wanting to cause arguments and wanting to cause fights and wanting to, just being this person that was angry at the world for the place that I was in when it was my fault and it was my responsibility to fix these things. At the time, I didn't have enough knowledge to understand that it was my fault and my responsibility. And now at 40 years old, because I'm an extreme ownership person, I can look back and I can say that everything that I've went through has been my fault. Yeah. And everything that I've went through has been my responsibility to fix. Listen, I believe that God put me through everything that he put me through as a blessing to turn me into the warrior that I am today. I really, truly believe that. I don't look at this and say, well, there's only a few things that I can't understand why God would do or how you could turn a positive out of it. And I won't go over a lot of those things. I don't like speaking negativity into the world, but there's very few things that I can see happening in a person's life that didn't happen for them and not to them. Everything that happened to me in my life happened for me, not to me. And the day that I realized that was the day that my life began to change. The day I realized that it was up to me, if it was going to be, that was the day my life changed.
Yeah. It's so fascinating, man. I do nationwide work with managers how do we make them better leaders? How do we make them high performance people development leaders? And what usually happens, I have to be real upfront with you, is I'll get in these relationships with these managers and I have groups and then we do one-on-ones too. And in the one-on-ones, what do we find out? Everybody has a story, right? And because I've had a story and I can relate to their story in most cases. I mean, I wrote a book on this, Keep the Change. It was about the 12 steps of recovery, and it's a leadership book. Why did I write that book? Because I believe that the 12 steps of recovery are the best leadership steps in the world. Step 1 is admit. Step 2, came to believe. Step 3, made a decision. Step 4, do an inventory. Step 10, do your inventory every day. Yeah. And you walk that walk. But what's so fascinating is I was put in this place. I wanted to be I'm a ministry leader too with the Celebrate Recovery, but I kind of once upon a time, wanted to be a pastor. And I know that God said, you're staying in the automobile business because that's where you need to stay. I don't look for people in the business that are addicts or struggling with anything, but because I've been through it, it gets attracted to me and it's an opportunity for me to make a big impact. Guess who else is that in this room? You, right? You're not looking to save the world, but because of the fact that you overcame, you're right. God's using you. Why do you think I did this to you? so you can help those masses. We mentioned when we first started, you're going to be on stages here in the next couple of years. You're going to be telling your story. You're going to be motivating people to the next level. Why? Because your story has such impact for so many people. Dude, I was a used car dealer, and you're an incredibly successful used car dealer. That's not why we were put on this earth. We were put on this earth to make an impact and add significance in such a different level. Yeah. So congratulations. And I know that's your future, and so do you. Yeah. So and it's your present. But we've got to talk about your business and how you got that business to where it is. Go ahead. You were going to say something.
Well, I want to say one thing before we move on, because, we're talking about Jesus, we're talking about God, we're talking about leadership. And I want to tell you a little bit of a transitional story for me that started to get me on the path to becoming a better leader. You have to understand the way that I'm built. When I make my mind up to do something, when I was 27, 28, 29, 30 years old, I would point blank tell you, I'm a train. Either you're in front of the train or you're on the train. But one way or another, the train is getting to the destination. And I don't need a team. I'll do it by myself. I'll move the cars. I'll sell the cars. I'll clean the cars. I'll buy the cars. I'll work from 1 a.m. until 1 a.m. if I have to, 6 days a week. If it kills me, I'll do it. And I'm telling you, when I first started my business, I literally would give people mental breakdowns with the amount of work that I would do. I mean, I was working. I would leave my house at 5 in the morning, and most days I didn't get home till 12:30, 1 o'clock. That's how much I was working, 6 days a week. Sundays I'd only work probably 10 hours, 7 to 10 hours. But that's how much I was working. I was doing wholesale, I was buying the cars, I was selling the cars. Anyway, my point is this. I did not understand leadership and team development. And one day I was listening to Ed Milet's podcast, and I try to give everyone credit where credit is due. And Ed Milet said something that was profoundly impactful in my life. He said, I used to be the type of guy that didn't believe that I needed a team to be successful. I didn't need to know how to develop a team to be successful. And then I started thinking, wait a minute, Jesus had 12 apostles, and Jesus was God. And if God needed 12 apostles to help him spread his message and story, so in essence, God needed a team to get the job done, then how can I as a man get a job done without a team? And that, I swear to you, was like a switch in my head, and I flipped immediately, and I started moving to personal development, team development, people skills within the team. I started learning about different personalities and how to deal with different people, because look, I'm a money motivated individual. So how did I used to deal with everybody before? I throw money at them. Well, that doesn't work for everybody. Some people want a pat on the back. Some people want to say they want to be told you did a good job. Some people want a day off to spend with their family. Some people are in it to help others. Some people are in it for the money. Being able to recognize that and identify that and use that to help people become the best version of themselves is key to being a leader and being able to develop good leadership skills. So I have a really good relationship with all 60 of my employees. I know them all on a first name basis. I know what makes them tick. I know what drives them. And I try to use those things to help them become the best versions of themselves. And that is how I kind of tie God into my leadership development.
What's so fascinating about that is, again, buddy, I don't know if we've talked deeply about this, but that is what I totally believe. Every podcast I say the same thing. So the listeners are thinking, Bart, here you go again. But I talk about 5 levels of leadership. The first one is position. I'm the boss. That's the way it is.
Yeah. That's the way that I was when I first started my company.
And then the second level is permission, where people build relationships, right? But the third level is production. We get stuff done. Yeah. So how many times in the business have we seen the production people that aren't necessarily the permission people? I don't care about relationships. Just do what I say, and I'll make you a lot of money. So good for us, right? Good for production people. But the fourth one is the one that blows me away. And the way you just said, it's people development.
Yeah.
And people don't want to know how much you know until they know how much you care. And you do care. You've been there. You care for them. I know you do. You didn't say it, but you said it when you said, I know everything about them. I know everybody's motivated differently. I know what makes them tick. That's the key to a people development manager. That's that you know those 60 people and you can say that allows them to know that, hey, man, I can trust Anthony. Anthony will help me. He's going to help me make money, but he really cares about me. And I'm going to progress because I work for and with Anthony.
Yeah.
Great stuff right there, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about, I want to hear how you got this business going, man. When did you open it? Tell me a little bit about the car business piece of that. Because I know you said that you had some big transitions, but how in the world did you get it up to 200 cars a month and be number one in Maryland?
So our best month we ever had was 252 cars. The whole story is this. I grew up in the car business. Two of my uncles that were in my life pretty significantly. Were both pretty successful in the car business. One was a wholesaler and one did buy here, pay here. I worked with both of them, different stages in my life. And I always bounced from the car business and waiting tables. And the reason that I did that was the car business requires your absolute attention in order to be extremely successful. And when you give the car business your absolute attention, the walls kind of blow off the buildings, right? Like at 19 years old, when I got my first job at a new car store at Coons Ford of Rockville, I was making 13, 14 grand a month at 19 years old. And I quit that job because somebody pissed me off because I didn't have the maturity to deal with the things that were being thrown at me. But I was making 13 grand a month at 19 years old. What 19-year-old makes 13 grand a month? None. Right now, I had grown up in the car business and I understood the sales process. Most importantly, I've always been a people person. I genuinely enjoy getting to know people and learning about them. And that's always been the basis of my sales, relationships and trust, right? And when people deal with me, they feel that from the very beginning. So anyway, I bounced back and forth between the car business and waiting tables, and I waited tables because I could work 3 days a week and make enough money to survive, or I could be in the car business and have no life and thrive. And I bounced back and forth between that all the way up until I was about 27 years old. My cousin came to me and he said, Anthony, let's start curbstoning some cars. And I probably shouldn't talk about this because it's illegal, but anyway, we will. We used to go to the auction and we'd buy two cars and we'd put them on Craigslist and we'd sell them. And we did that for a number of months. And Morris and I are both pretty by the book guys. I mean, obviously living the way I did, I didn't want to, get in trouble or deal with the MVA. So, we hated living looking over our shoulder. And one day I said, I kind of have a base of knowledge of wholesale and retail. Why don't we try to get our license and do this thing for real? And so we started the process to get our wholesale license. We got it in 2013, and we started buying cars and doing business to business sales in the car business as wholesaling. We'd buy one car and bring it to another place. Morris had quit a really good job at Booz Allen in Hamilton. He was making about $125,000 a year. And, me, I only needed about $500 a week to live. And when we first started, that's about what we were making. We were making about $500 a week. I was like a pig in shit because I was working for myself and making $500 a week, and he was depressed. And which I understood because he had a high overhead at home. So he ended up leaving and getting into the real estate business. And this is when things really started to take off for me because I wasn't necessarily tied to what someone else was doing. If I wanted to wake up at, 5 o'clock in the morning and leave the house and work until 1, I could. And that's what I started to do. And one of the things that's interesting about the universe is as you start moving in a certain direction and taking laser focused action, using laser focused action to your advantage, doors start to open for you. And that's exactly what happened. Doors started to open for me. I got one wholesale account, then another wholesale account, then another wholesale account. And I started making a lot of money, like a lot of money, 60, 70, $80,000 a month. and I was banking all this money and putting it away. My wife was cutting hair at the time, and I used to drive past this car dealership every time I'd go see her to, sit with her for a little while, and they weren't moving any cars. So one day I stopped in there and I said, "Hey, what's going on here?" And he said, "I'm a mechanic. I ended up with this place. I fix the cars, but I don't really know how to sell the cars." And I thought to myself, this is interesting. I had kind of seen the writing on the wall with wholesale. And what I mean by that is this: I would develop a relationship, I would start to make a lot of money. The owner of the store would realize I was making a lot of money, and you'd get thrown out of the store. And then you'd have to go find another store, and the same process would repeat. And the more money you made, the more likely you were to get kicked out of the store. And so you had to be kind of a master of relationships and flying under the radar and all this other stuff. And so I saw the writing on the wall for the wholesale business, and I said to myself, all right, I think it's time to transition into retail. So I went to Tim and I said, "Tim, listen, I'll bring my cars here. I'll kind of store them here. I'll wholesale. If they sell while I'm wholesaling, we'll split the money." And he said, "That's a great idea." So I started parking some cars up there. Nothing was selling because there was no salesperson. And I said, "Okay, well, I'll kind of sit up here and I'll try to sell some cars." And then so I started sitting up there and I started selling, 20, 30 cars a month. The first month, I think we did like 22 or 23 cars. The second month, I think we did like 28. And then from there, it just continued to grow and grow and grow. And I hired more and more people. I got lucky because the building is like 30,000 square feet. There's a mechanic shop, a real showroom, an upstairs, finance offices. So as I grew, I had the ability to grow. There's a body shop. So I could do anything, right? We could buy a car that needed an engine, put an engine in if I wanted to. I didn't do that, but sometimes the engines go bad when you buy a car, and we were able to fix it, which gave me an ability to keep costs down, which gave me an ability to sell a lot of cars. And so my philosophy has always been sell them cheap and stack them deep. And that's what I do at Hampstead Pre-Owned. I price my cars extremely competitive, and I bring a lot of people in the door, and we sell a lot of cars.
That's awesome, man. What an incredible story, bro. I mean, really incredible. I appreciate the fact that you're not stagnant either. We talked about your other career that you're going to pursue on top of what you're doing now.
Yeah.
And what we've talked about that you're a student of Jim Rohn, Ed Milat, people that are thought changers in this world. And you are, man, you're a student, you're a leader, you grow others. Who has had the most impact other than family, outside of family? Who's had the most impact? And I want to hear that before we take off today.
Absolutely, 100%, unequivocally, without a doubt, Jim Rohn and Andy Frisella.
Right.
Those two people have absolutely 100% changed my life. I hope one day to be able to give Andy Frisella a hug and some kind of gift for what he's brought to my life. It could almost bring me to tears. Besides Robert, my uncle, the man that took me in and spent every day with me, fighting with me to turn me into the man I am, Andy Frisella has had such an incredible impact in my life. When I was going through COVID, I started listening to the MFCEO project, and the amount of knowledge that I gained from that podcast and listening to him and how he overcome. And, one of the things about him is he has this way of speaking where things don't go over your head. He's a real person that speaks in a real way that you can understand, and he's incredibly intelligent. I started reading because of him. I started exercising again because of him. I started pushing myself again because of him. And then when you tie Jim Rohn into it, I think that Jim Rohn, content wise, is probably the greatest speaker that has ever lived in the history of the world. Well, in just the history of what I can find. I mean, every single thing he says has some kind of deep meaning behind it. And when you listen to him and when you study him and when you try to understand what he's talking about, the effects that it'll have on your life are incredible. Those are the two people that I would say changed my life.
Yeah, that's so good. Now, you have kids?
I do. I have two boys. One's 18 and one is 3, Blake and Barrett.
Right on. How blessed are they to have a father like you, man?
Well, I'm blessed to have them. One of the questions you had on your thing that you sent me, where you said, these are some of the questions I may ask. You said, who's your hero? And this might make me cry. My son Blake is my hero. He taught me how to be compassionate. He taught me empathy. He taught me how to be patient. He made me into the father that I am to bear it. And
Mm,
I'm so thankful for my son because I push so hard every day to be the best version of myself for him and for
yeah,
me and for him.
yeah.
And he's my hero, man. And he's been my greatest teacher, and I love him with all my heart.
Now, you know what? Someday he'll say to you, if he hasn't already,
Yeah,
Dad, you're my hero.
yeah,
Right. And when that day happens, doesn't matter how many cars we sell,
yeah,
none of it matters. You'll know you've done the exact right thing. I'm honored to be your friend.
yeah.
I've enjoyed this as I always enjoy my podcast. So but man, I got to tell you, it's elite on who you are. Dude, I never thought I'd get you to cry. I'm so jacked up. I'm so jacked up that you came for the tears
Yeah,
only because I know you're intense, tough
yeah,
guy. And I love seeing your heart, man. I love
yeah.
seeing it. I'm proud of who you are. And I'm look forward to deepening our friendship. I really am.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. And, I'm always here if anybody has any questions or, wants to reach out. If I can help in any way, I'm always happy to help.
Right on. So why don't you tell them how they can get a hold of you?
Oh, there's lots of ways. You can text message me. My phone number is 443-900-9578. You can get me on Facebook. It's Anthony Birdsong. Real easy. I have a very unique last name. I think there's probably only 3 Anthony Birdsongs in the United States of America, and I'm the most handsome. Um, you got Instagram. It's Anthony underscore bird underscore brand. TikTok's the same thing, Anthony Bird underscore brand. You can catch me on any one of those. You can message me on any one of those. And I'm always really happy to help. Do a lot of videos every day on different things, different motivational things where I try to pass a lot of the messages on that I've learned through different people. But
Yeah.
I'm always here to help.
Right on. You know what? He's also here to speak. So
Yeah.
if you want a speaker that's in the trenches and have done it and wants to tell you that your people need to hear the story of contrast and going from dark to light, man, this is the guy, Anthony Birdsong. So thank you, Anthony. Appreciate you, brother. I can't tell you enough how I'm so glad that we got to have this time together. We'll talk to you next time. And yeah, you got to come back too, man. And as you get your speaking business going, yeah, we'll get you back on here and we'll tell the people the story of that too.
I'd love to. Thank you. See
Thanks,
you.
Anthony.
Bye.